The main consistency behind the contradictions surrounding Darth Bane's lightsaber is that the literary sources consistently described the weapon as hook-handled, where the artwork of Bane consistently depicted him with a standard hilt, though the artists couldn't seem to agree on whether his blade was supposed to be red or purple. While I can forgive the various artists for failing to follow the description from Bane of the Sith by Kevin J. Anderson, given the relative obscurity of that particular short story, the Darth Bane trilogy penned by Drew Karpyshyn cemented the lightsaber as a curve-hilted model, so I think we can all agree that the fact that almost none of the post-trilogy artists got the memo is actually kind of frustrating. Even the Rule of Two cover art by John Van Fleet depicts him with a standard lightsaber. As it stands, there is only one official image that depicts Darth Bane wielding the appropriate hilt, the artwork of his final confrontation with Darth Zana in Dynasty of Evil, illustrated by Jeffrey Carlisle and presented in The Essential Reader's Companion. I don't know about you, but it seemed to me that, with his illustration of the Tython duel from Rule of Two presented in The Essential Guide to Warfare, the artist Chris Scaff was actively trying to keep the hilt's dimensions ambiguous. The most complete description of the weapon was provided in Part 1 of the Darth Bane trilogy, Path of Destruction, though it was focused primarily on the ergonomics of the weapon rather than its specific design layout. The angled hilt fit more snugly into the palm, providing superior leverage and subtly changing the angle of the blade when striking, potentially confusing or disorienting an opponent. Pistol-gripped dueling lightsabers of this sort were traditionally associated with Form 2 lightsaber combat, though Blademaster Kasim considered it a good match for Bane's Form 5 technique. As Kasim noted, some moves were undercut by this design, while others were optimized. If I were to speculate on the design layout, based on the weapon's description as hook-handled, it's likely that, rather than possessing the gentle 30-degree bend of Count Dooku's lightsaber, the weapon instead resembled one of Asajj Ventress's lightsabers, with a severe 90-degree curve in the lower handle. Darth Bane's role-playing game character sheets presented in the Darkside Sourcebook and Threats of the Galaxy both stated that Bane constructed his own lightsaber, but this was refuted by Path of Destruction, which depicted Bane receiving the weapon as a gift from Sith Blademaster Kasim. The lightsaber was originally wielded by Kasim's master Nadaz, himself a dedicated lightsaber duelist, Kasim's earliest memories being the dancing lights of his master's practice drills. Kasim eventually challenged Nadaz to combat and bested him, taking the lightsaber as a trophy. It remained in his possession for 10 years before he ultimately bestowed it to Bane, to commemorate his greatest apprentice's victory over his hated rival, Sirak. The ruby blade that the weapon projected when Bane first acquired it was generated by a crystal of unknown origin, but was confirmed by Lord Cordus to be less powerful than the synthetic crystal that he supplied Bane with. Given that Cordus's statements suggested that the ruby crystal was also synthetic, it's possible that Nadaz fabricated it to match the properties of Adegan-style crystals to circumvent the limitations of typical synth crystals, enabling a more technique-oriented approach. Standard dark-side-attuned synthetic crystals possessed superior cutting power and a potential blade-breaking capability, but this was counterbalanced by impaired handling and blade instability, forcing wielders to remain attuned to the dark side to maintain weapon integrity. However, while these pitfalls made such artificial gems a liability for technique-based duelists in the mold of Count Dooku, which I suspect Nadaz was, I believe that they would be an asset for Darth Bane, the reduced handling actually reinforcing his strength-based fighting style, and the need to stabilize the crystal helping him to maintain his Dark Force focus. Darth Bane would go on to create the Bane's Heart Crystal, which he gifted to his apprentice Zana as one of the two crystals powering her saber staff. Wikipedia cites the StarWars.com article The Story of General Grievous, Lord of War, as its source on the properties of the crystal, but unfortunately the article was taken down a while ago, which means that I can't check it myself, so the following information is from second-hand sources. The most notable feature of the gem was that it could only be used by the specific force wielder that it was attuned to, and would emit electrical discharges as a security measure anytime the lightsaber containing it was wielded by someone else. Darth Zana's saber staff, which was named for the Bane's Heart crystal, followed the standard design, featuring an elongated hilt to accommodate its additional focusing crystals. It can be easily inferred from the description that, rather than being assembled by linking two separate lightsabers at the pommels, the weapon was built as a single piece, a secondary emitter installed onto a single mechanism. Most notably, the weapon was calibrated to project shortened 75cm blades rather than the standard length of 1 meter. This was intended to enable her application of Form 3, cycling her weapon through constant twirling spins in order to deflect aside attacks, a likely example of the Circle of Shelter technique. When Darth Bane was captured by a mercenary team hired by the Princess of Doan, his lightsaber was briefly taken from him by the group's leader, an Iktachi who called herself the Huntress. However, she returned the weapon when she pledged herself to the Sith as a new apprentice, taking the name Darth Cognis. Immediately thereafter, Darth Zana challenged Bane for the mantle of Dark Lord. Bane dominated in the ensuing lightsaber duel, though Zana managed to turn the tables with Sith sorcery, obliterating Bane. Darth Bane's lightsaber was passed on to Darth Cognis, who stepped up as Zana's apprentice, though only as an interim weapon until she could build her own. Zana's lightsaber eventually found its way into General Grievous's lightsaber collection and was effectively inherited by NK Necrosis, an advanced combat droid constructed from Grievous's burnt-out chassis. NK Necrosis was ultimately destroyed by an unknown party on Kashyyyk, who took the saber staff.